We are more than we've believed ourselves to be, and we must go beyond where we are and our experience. We must expand from center to circumference, but the circumference of our lives is not just this physical circumference. And the circumference of our lives is not really just our own limited affairs. We thought it was at one time, did we not? But we are life itself, and we must go beyond where we thought we ended. And where we thought we ended is only the beginning of the larger experience that we seek. Tonight we complete the lesson series on the 12 steps to a spiritual experience. But it's only the lesson series that we complete. We will not complete the study of the steps because we're only beginning. You can only understand these steps in terms of your own living experience. This classroom is not the classroom. Your life is the classroom. These principles must be taken out into one's life and practiced, and then understanding comes. And not one of us here has completed the application of spiritual law to our own lives. We've hardly scratched the surface. We have just barely consciously started. But just a little bit goes a long way. You bet it does. And just a little bit of practicing of spiritual principles in your life will take you a long way. It will take you farther than you ever thought you would be in this life. Now, it's only been a short time, these weeks, but if we've been honest and searching and fearless in our unfolding, then something of great magnitude has started to happen to us. I stood here in this sanctuary this afternoon alone, and a young man in his mid-30s, a husband, father of 2 children, came in, and there was a special something about him that I had not beheld before. I said, "Hi, I'm glad you're on this side of town." He lives quite some distance away. I said, "I'm glad you were over here so that you could stop by." He said, "I would have been here this afternoon no matter where I was." He said, "I had to tell you that it's happening." He said, "At last it's happening." He said, "At last it's happening to me. I never thought it would happen to me." And I didn't have to say what's happening to you. And you know what's happening to him. His spiritual awakening, his own personal experience with the creative intelligence and love that has formed and shaped and is sustaining the universe, is giving a new form and shape to his experience, and it is tangible and discernible to him. It is an experience. As the result of these steps, or as the result of fulfilling the condition. And he had to carry the message to me. He couldn't keep it inside himself. He wanted me to know. And he stood here talking about, wasn't even aware of the 12th step. He stood here talking about going out into his life to practice these principles in all of his affairs. He said, "Now that I've got it, I've got to go do something with it." You see, when you have a spiritual experience or awakening, you cannot stand still. You must go forward into action. All of the lethargy of the past fades away. And movement, momentum, zeal, enthusiasm begins to move that one relentlessly forward into new and exciting and joyful experiences. You see, the joy of living is the theme of this 12th step, and action is the key word of this great principle. Let me read to you from Cosmic Consciousness by Buck. Many of you know this is a book of the experiences of many people who have had this experience at a very high level. This experience that Jesus called the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven experience, it's called by other names in other faiths. And on page 76, I read to you when a person has entered into or been touched by this consciousness, he knows without learning certain things, as for instance, that the universe is not a dead machine but a living presence. It becomes an experience, tangible and real. Suddenly life around him begins to respond in discernible ways. He takes on an enormously greater capacity both for learning and for initiating, the capacity to go into action. And within this experience is an expanding sense of joy and of peace and of beauty, the absolute sense that all is well. And the negative reaction to what we call problems in the past, or conditions, or disease, or sin, that negative response to life is totally disintegrated. It cannot exist in such a person. It cannot. And this is your destiny and mine, because we are such a person. We are such a being. And the primary purpose of our life on this earth should be to fulfill the conditions of that experience. And all other things, all other relationships or conditions are merely opportunities for one to move forward and demonstrate this state of mind, and those things are not to be ends in themselves. They are means to this experience only. Your life is merely an opportunity for you to demonstrate your divine nature, and if we're demonstrating anything less than that, then we fall short and are not fulfilled. When we really begin to see this 12th step in its full implication, then we know that at last, at long last, in our eternal unfolding, that we are ready to begin to become responsible citizens, not just of Michigan or wherever you may be when you hear this tape, but responsible citizens of the universe. You see, we cannot graduate from this level of life until we fulfill the conditions where we are. There's no escape from personal responsibility. No one can practice these principles for us. No one can think for us, love for us, and begin to put on our right mind for us. That requires personal responsibility, does it not? And your life is the place you do this. Your life was divinely designed. It's the perfect laboratory. So begin to love it, because it is the place that you can demonstrate for all time, for all eternity, that you know who you are, and you know it so well that you can stand tall and straight in the middle of your life and act like it. That you're God's perfect child. But we cannot get where we want to go alone. Remember that West said that he prayed that he would be removed to a special place with special people like you to have the experience of being helped and helping, receiving, giving. This is an old story. You've heard many versions of it. I'll give you one. An executive died and went to heaven. And there he found all the former executives that he had known were separated into two groups. The failures were in one hall, one great, beautiful hall, and the successful ones were in another, and there, of course, were more failures than there were successful ones. And he was wandering around and had not yet found his place. And around mealtime, he entered the hall of those who had failed and was surprised to find that the occupants of that place were hungry and thin-looking, had a distressed expression on their face. And as they were being seated at the dinner table, some angels came in and began strapping long spoons on their arms, but they were strapped on in such a way, then they were so long, that once there they couldn't bend their arms. And so dinner was served, and everyone looked at the dinner, but they couldn't bend their arms. They could not feed themselves. And he went into the next hall, and there were all the successful executives. They all looked fat and well-fed and prosperous. And the same condition existed, but you guess what happened. As soon as dinner was on the table, each one dipped his spoon into the bowl and smilingly reached across the table and fed his brother. We must take what we have and share it, because we can only keep what we give away, and that's all. And our 12th step says that as the result of practicing all of the other steps, that we have had an experience, that something is happening to us that we call a spiritual awakening or a spiritual experience. And when a person has had a spiritual experience, the most important meaning of it is that he or she is now able to do and to feel and to believe some things that they could not do, that they did not feel, and that they did not believe before. And these things are discernible to that person if they will be honest with themselves. Something has happened that was not happening. And that person begins to feel like that he's been granted a gift which in some way he had to fulfill the conditions for. Cannot happen without some action on our part. But it is a gift. And it is a gift of consciousness, of awareness. A new being exists. A new person is there. And looking back into the distant past, it's like looking at that other self, like watching an old cowboy movie. Who was that guy? Not I. Because the old is dead and the new is appearing. And such a person begins to feel that life is not a dead end, not something to be endured from sunrise until bedtime, but that life is the most exciting experience on earth. And if your life is not, well, it can be. In a very real sense, such a person has been transformed because he's laid hold of a source of strength, a source of power, intelligence, love, energy that hitherto he had denied himself. And he has the experience of observing a power greater than himself doing for him things that formerly were impossible. Isn't that exciting? You bet it is. Wish you could have seen the expression on that man's face when he walked in here today and said, "It's happening to me. It's real. It is happening to me. I was boxed into my life and nothing was working, and now it is, and I know why." That's great. And such a person finds himself in possession of a degree of honesty. Man, you just let the chips fall where they may. You don't have to fake or pretend or try to be something that one is not. Tolerance, unselfishness to the point of an intense desire that other people can experience what you're experiencing. The continued concern for oneself is no longer there. It disintegrates. The mind that formerly only thought about itself and its small and limited ideas, and God, do for me what I can't do for myself. Me, and I. It's gone. And there is no freedom until that is gone. So one begins to live from that larger self that reaches out and touches and loves and is interested and concerned, but not fearful or afraid for the life of another person. We have to make ourselves ready for it and ask it. Now, we've been talking these weeks about how to receive this gift, and we've said that it lies in the practicing of these 12 steps. So for a moment now, let's consider briefly what we've been doing these weeks. Step 1 showed us an amazing paradox. We found that we were totally unable to manage our life until we first admitted that we were powerless to manage our life. Wasn't that a strange idea when we first discovered it? Because we thought we were supposed to manage our lives and determine our way. In step 2, we saw that since we could not restore ourselves to a divine order, sanity, that some higher power must necessarily do so if we were to survive. We came to believe that it might be possible for us, and consequently in step 3, we turned our will and our lives over to the care of such a power of God as we then understood Him. And beginning with step 4, we commenced to search out the things in ourselves which had caused the problem. Until now, we did not believe that the things in us had caused the problem. And we became willing to look and to take a physical, moral, and spiritual inventory of ourselves to see what had made us bankrupt in these areas of our lives, and to look honestly and searchingly and fearlessly. In step 5, we decided that such an inventory alone would not be enough. We knew that sneaky ego would see it and then lie about it. And so we admitted to God, to another human being, and to ourselves the exact nature, what our experience had been. Step 6, many of us balked in the beginning because we weren't entirely ready to have God remove our defects and our shortcomings because we liked them too good. Some of those things that were killing us were fun, we thought, for a while. Step 7, we humbly asked God to remove our shortcomings as best we could release them that day. In step 8, we continued our house cleaning, for we saw that we were not only in conflict with ourselves, but also with people and situations in the world in which we lived. And as we had started making our peace within ourselves, so we must do so in the world around us. And we made a list of all the persons we had harmed and became willing to set things right. And we followed this up in step 9 by making direct amends to those people, except when to do so would injure them or someone else. And by this time, in step 10, the taking of an inventory, the observing of ourselves in our daily lives had started being so much fun that we decided to do it every day. To continue to watch ourselves, and when we were wrong, to promptly admit it. In step 11, we saw that if a higher power was restoring this fantastic new order in our lives, and if these things were happening to us, and not only to us, but others here that we have met and talked to, if God is doing all of these things for all the rest of you, I want to know Him. I want a closer conscious contact with such a power, responsive love. And we saw that through the persistent use, the continued use of meditation and prayer, that we could establish such a conscious contact, and that in the beginning it would ebb and flow, it might fade away, but it would come back, and the experience of that love and energy coming into us would increase from just a bare trickle in the beginning until it would become a surging river of life flowing through us. And so now we're at step 12. But until now, we've been receiving mostly, going within ourselves, working within ourselves, and our action has been mostly with ourselves. But we're ready to become mature spiritual beings now. And even the newest of the newcomers to the spiritual life has looked around and observed the beauty of the phenomena of someone helping someone else, and of seeing the marvelous change that is there, of seeing someone in distress but willing to be changed, reach out and being responded to. In all of life, there is nothing more beautiful than this. if you have hungered and hurt, and if you have been alone and afraid, and if you did not know where your answers were, and if your days and your nights were without meaning, and if there was no hope on the face of this earth, and then you found that there was someone that cared, another human being that not only cared, but understood you, understood and was concerned, that in itself is a tremendous healing. And how good it is to be the one who is understood. Oh, but how much greater it is to be the one who understands. Oh, yes, it is. Let me read to you from Matthew, the 9th and 10th chapters. The master teacher traveled around through all the cities and villages of that area, teaching in the Jewish synagogues and announcing the good news about the kingdom, about this consciousness, this state of mind. And wherever he went, he healed the people of every sort of illness. There's no limitation to God's power to restore people, you know. And what concern he felt for the crowds that came, because their problems were so great, and they didn't know what to do or where to go for help. They were like sheep without a shepherd. The harvest is so great and the workers are so few, he said. So, pray to the one in charge of the harvesting and ask him to recruit more workers for his harvest fields. And you know he's not talking about wheat. He's talking about the harvesting of people. But remember that people have to be ready for the harvest, just as the wheat must be ready to be brought into the barn. Go and announce to them that the kingdom of heaven is near. Go and announce to them that the experience is theirs. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cure the lepers, and cast out demons. You know what a demon is? Have you never experienced a demon? That fit of temper, anger. That little demon that comes in about once every now and then and says it's time to be depressed. That's a demon, friends. Do you believe that you have the power to heal the sick? Sick at heart? You bet. You do. You do. As a matter of fact, if you're being healed of the sickness of your heart, you have the power to heal others, and the only way you can truly be healed is to go and touch them with what you are experiencing. And to raise the dead, and you say, but I cannot raise one as Lazarus was raised, the spiritually dead. Do you not know someone whose life is over, their livingness is over, all the life has gone out of their life? They're dead. You mean that you do not have the power to raise them up into another experience? Of course you do, because you yourself were raised up. Give as freely as you have received. Give as freely as you have received. We didn't know about that yet, did we? The spirit of this universe withholds none of itself from ourselves. That's how freely we have received. We have started to receive the gift, but it must be given just as freely so that we become channels of that divine current of love and power, concern, strength, and energy. Now, any city or home that doesn't welcome you, well, shake off the dust of that place from your feet as you leave. Have you, in your new enthusiasm, gone out into a place and you were going to fix them, but you weren't welcome? If they know you pretty good, you probably aren't welcome. Did you know that? Shake off the dust. Don't stand there trying. Most of the people that you and I decide that we're going to fix, we're going to cast out their demons. and give them a new life. So then we'll be happy after they get fixed. Forget it. Most of the people that you and I will touch are people that we do not yet know. There will be many exceptions to this. As you move forward into your own experience, you will draw to you the people that will see you only as this exciting being who is demonstrating many things that that person wants. They will want what you have. But don't spend time and energy on those that do not want what you have. Spend no energy. Be not angry or dismayed, and do not take it personally. Just walk on. Walk on. Shake the dust off your feet. Isn't that a marvelous expression when you understand what it means? Don't blame them. You keep on walking on and demonstrating in your own life the things that you speak. In time, that same one might come and say, I really do want what you have. I've been watching you for a long time now. But we begin to discover that whether our brother has received us or not, or taken from us our gift, that a marvelous thing has continued to happen. That although our own life is not completely straight yet, that we do have the capacity to help others. And in the helping, our own life expands. That as we share, that which we are already experiencing continues to increase. Many of you asked me last week, who was the saint? Remember the prayer that I read to you? St. Francis of Assisi. In his 21st year, St. Francis had a serious illness. And during the time of that illness, he became dissatisfied with his way of life. And following his recovery, he thought, he set out on a military expedition. He was going out and become a military person. He discovered a career that would please him now. He did not like what his life had been giving him. But at the end of the first day of his new career, he became ill again and had to return to Assisi. That was not a very long or promising career, was it? And this disappointment brought on again the spiritual crises that he experienced during the time of his illness. Now, one day not long after that, he gave a banquet to his friends, and they liked that pretty good, because everybody knew that the wine flowed pretty good over at his house. He was not known for his spiritual condition in those days. And when the party was over, and they were reeling through the streets, Francis was crowned as king of the revelers. He was the one that was in first place. And in a little while, they missed him and went to search for him and found him in a trance-like state. And he was a permanently altered man because he had this experience. He was having an experience with the Spirit of the universe. And he spent much time after that in prayer and meditation, and took a long pilgrimage to Rome, and not long after he was back from Rome to Assisi, the experience that really changed his life took place. His life was not changed yet. Oh, things were happening inside him, but not beyond that. He was a man that people could look at and say, and his friends did, he's a strange one now. He thinks he has established a conscious contact with God. One day he was walking down the street and passed by a begging leper. And he did this because he had a special horror of lepers. He had an intense fear of leprosy and did not want to become close to a leper at all. Now here was a man who had established his conscious contact with God, and he passed his brother by in a great circle. And then he stopped and immediately began the most heroic act of self-conquest of his whole life. It changed him. He made himself go back and give the leper all of his money, and he took the leper's hand and kissed it and put his arms around him and held him close. Do you have a feeling for that? Until he did that, his spiritual experience was nothing. If it's a thing that exists inside oneself only, if it cannot reach out and comfort and touch and heal, and if it cannot overcome one's fear of death or of dying or of the loss of an economic situation, then it is not spiritual. This man did it. And from that day forward, he gave himself in the service of man. And he became St. Francis of Assisi. Now, in this matter of giving, I must mention something here. It is so necessary for us to become willing to give of ourselves. But there must be balance and order in our lives. We have been talking about balance and order. And many times I have seen us, and there have been times when I have experienced in my own life, using the helping of others as an escape from the responsibility of one's own experience. You see, our primary responsibility is to establish and maintain an orderly life. You cannot give something away that you don't have, unless there is order in one's own affairs. Let me give an example of someone, perhaps, that would fall into the category that I'm talking about. We become so enthusiastic about the spiritual life and its advantages and what it will do that we don't get up in the morning and go to work. George needs help. Or at work, talking to friends on the telephone half the day, day after day, takes precedence over the responsibilities of that situation. And long evenings spent away from our area of primary responsibility. I must go help them when at home there are others who certainly need my concern too. Can you think of any other examples? And in time we begin to find that it doesn't take as much time to help people as we formerly believed anyhow, because you cannot help a sick person on their terms. And their terms will eat you up in time and in energy, and again the long, ceaseless telephone conversations, and over you hear the complaints, the description of their problems and of their disease. But somehow they will not spend the time to come to class. They will not do the things that you're doing to be well, to be healed, to have this experience. But they always hold out the hope, if you will just spend some more time with me and pay one more of my bills perhaps, then everything will be all right. Shake the dust off your feet. If they want what you have, they are willing to go to any lengths to get it. Oh yes, we must be willing to give, and Spirit will put us in the right place at the right time with the right people to both receive and give. Now comes the biggest question yet. What about the practicing of these principles in all of our affairs? In all of our affairs. Are we willing to take this newfound enthusiasm for the presence of God out into our lives, out into our world, and look at where the problems were, and go out with these new ideas flowing and this new enthusiasm surging us forward to recreate our outer world? Are we willing to become the best secretary or homemaker or salesperson or unity minister or musician that we can possibly be? Are we willing to be in that job that we do not like and have not liked for years? As a matter of fact, it was the real problem anyhow, wasn't it? I wasn't fulfilled. Now, here we are experiencing God. And experiencing God. and experiencing God, and going out into our job and not experiencing God, and not experiencing God? Are we willing to go out and transform that job? There's someone here tonight who in the last 3 weeks of loving a position that they formerly hated has had 2 offers to move into a better position. As a matter of beginning to pause right where they are and practice the presence of God and of love and of gratitude for having this marvelous opportunity that one formerly hated. Change your attitude about it. Practice these principles where formerly we practiced negative emotions and negative reactions, and watch what begins to happen. Are we willing to go out and recognize our responsibilities in the world around us and fulfill those responsibilities? Think about it. Are you willing right now to get so turned on about your life and about the understanding and the power that you have and the sustaining support of God that you are going back into your world and every aspect of that world, in your home, in your work situation, in every area, and be a transformed, turned on, excited person who is solving the problems that are there rather than reacting to those problems? Because until we do that, we are not practicing the spiritual life. You see, we've come to believe that sincere prayer and meditation, which are mighty channels of spiritual vitality and power, lead us into the next great step, which is effective living. Effective living, balanced, orderly living, successful living, the putting on of prosperity and the good health in our bodies and minds and in all of our relationships, and the willingness to tackle every area where this good health does not exist. Ralph Waldo Emerson's most famous quotation was, "What a man is speaks so loud I can't hear what he said." And people will not hear you and me until they see us demonstrating moment by moment in all of our affairs the truth of which we speak. Do not go and tell someone a thing until you are living that thing in their presence. Do not do that. Don't go into the office or at home and speaking a spiritual language that your life is not a reflection of. Let your life be a reflection, and they will come and say, "I hear you. I see you." How are we willing to come to terms with what seems to be failure in our lives? When St. Francis, for example, was awakening to his spiritual experience, his life, this world around him, was exactly the way it was. Nothing had changed. It had not taken shape and form yet. And he could look around him. His father withdrew from him the family funds, left him without a dime. Not only did he have all the former problems, but he was broke. How would you react to that? Would you put your arms around him like you did that leper? Say, "Thank you, Father, because all things are working together for my good"? Or does one adjust to a problem by putting on despair and depression? Oh no, not in the spiritual life. No, we must awaken again and again to the awareness that we are sons and daughters of this mighty power that loves us and is concerned for us moment by moment. Gutzon Borglum turned a mountain into a monument, Mount Rushmore, remember, in South Dakota? He achieved in his life the most colossal sculpture that was ever attempted by man. The heads of Washington and Jefferson and Lincoln and Theodore Roosevelt are there. You've seen them perhaps. But in your life, you are facing the prospect of achieving a sculpture far more significant than that. In one of his early sculptures, the head of Lincoln that's in the Capitol at Washington, I've seen it. As he was carving it from that block of granite, a little girl walked up to him and began to see the emerging face of Abraham Lincoln, and she said, "Is that Abraham Lincoln?" And Gutzon Borglum said, "Yes." The little girl said, "How in the world did you know he was in there?" What in the world is in you trying to come out? Let it come out. Carve it out. Carlyle said, "The older I grow, and I now stand on the brink of eternity, the more comes back to me that sentence in the Catechism which I learned when a child, and the fuller and deeper its meaning becomes. What is the chief end of man? To glorify God and enjoy Him forever." And Thomas Blake wrote in The Searchers, "I looked for my soul, but my soul I could not see. I looked for my God, but my God eluded me. I looked for a friend, and then I found all three." So it is.